We are going to talk about John Keats. John Keats is an English poet who was born in 1795 in London and died in 1821 in Rome, Italy. He was an English romantic poet who devoted his very short life to the perfection of poetry, marked by the use of vivid imagery, great sensuous appeal, and attempt to express a philosophy through classical legends. He was a son of a livery stable manager who received almost no formal education. His father died at an early age, 1804, and his mother remarried immediately. All through his life, Keats had a close relationship with his siblings. After the breakup of their mother's second marriage, the Keats went and lived with their widowed grandmother at Edmonton. And that's where Keats began reading ferociously. And they were put under the guardianship of Richard Abbey. John Keats was an apprentice to a surgeon at Edmonton under the advice of Richard Abbey. But he broke off his apprenticeship and went to work as a horse dresser, surgeon at Keats and St. Thomas hospitals. But at this time, he had become so much interested in writing poetry. He had been introduced to poetry at an early age, and he read poetry of poets like Edmund Spenser and also the Elizabethans. These are the early models, and his first mature poem that he actually wrote was On Looking into Chapman's Homer in 1816. Inspired by Chapman's translation of the Iliad and the Odyssey, Keats was introduced to a journalist and a contemporary poet, Leith Hunt, and his circle of friends, John Hamilton and Benjamin Haydon. Keats sees through himself as plunged into the delighted contemplation of his sensuous natural beauty, and he realizes that he must leave this for an understanding of what he calls the agony and strife of human hearts. Therefore, Keats decides to leave London to the Isle of Wight, and then later on to Canterbury. And then he began writing on the poem Endymion, his first long poem. And when he returned to London, he went back to Hampstead with his brothers, and the poem is published with its verse composed of loose, rhymed couplets. Keats goes steadily from writing poetry, and there are family troubles as his brother Tom is sick with tuberculosis, and he had to nurse him through the last part of his illness. It is at this point that he meets a young lady, Fanny Brown, and she is his neighbor at Hampstead, and he falls hopelessly but tragically in love because this lady could not reciprocate the love that Keats had for her. She seemed to be an exceptional young woman of firm and generous character and kindly disposed towards Keats, but he expected more, which the woman could not give to him. His unstable financial situation and his failing health made it impossible for their relationship to take a different level or the normal course. And so after the death of Tom, George goes to America and Keats moves to Wentworth Place with Brown. And in 1819, Brown and her mother became his next door neighbors. In October 1819, John Keats became engaged to Fanny. And after the publication of Endymion, Keats was not satisfied with his work and he set out to write most of his greatest poetry in 1819, Lamia, The Eve of St. Agnes, and the Great Odes. Then he also wrote the two versions of Hipparion, which he accomplished under the strain of illness and his growing love for Brown. The Odes are Keats' most distinctive poetic achievements. They're essentially lyrical meditation on some other objects or quality that prompts the poet to confront the conflicting impulses of his inner being and to reflect upon his own longings and the relationships to the wider world around him. All the odes were composed between March and June, except to autumn. The internal debates in the odes center on the dichotomy of external, transcendent ideas and the transience and change of the physical world. This subject matter was imposed on Keats by the painful death of his brother and his own failing health because he had contracted tuberculosis while nursing his brother. The odes highlight his struggle for self-awareness and the certainty through the liberating powers of his imagination. In Ode to a Nightingale, there is a visionary happiness in communicating with the nightingale, and its song is contrasted with the dead weight of human grief and sickness, and the transience of youth and beauty, strongly brought home to Keats in recent months by his brother's death. The theme is taken up more distinctly in Ode on a Grecian urn. The figures of lovers depicted on the Greek urn become for him a symbol of an unending but unconsummated passion that subtly belies the poem's celebrated conclusion. Beauty is truth. Truth is beauty. And that's all ye know on earth and all you need to know. He moves further in the Ode to Melancholy, where he recognizes that sadness is the inevitable committant of human passion and happiness, and that the transience of joy and the desire is an inevitable aspect of the natural process. Therefore, he says that life is a combination of happiness and sadness. Into Autumn. This is a poem that is essentially a record of an experience of fulfillment. Autumn, which is considered a season of death or decay, but here he transformed it to become a season of complete ripeness and fulfillment. A pause in time when everything has reached fruition and the question of transience is hardly raised. These poems, with their rich and exquisitely sensuous details and meditative depth, are among the greatest achievements of romantic poetry. Among them is La Belle Dame Sans Merci, then we have the Eve of St. Agnes, then we also have Hipparion, which exists in different versions. The poem's subject matter is a suppression of the earlier Greek gods, the Titans, by the later Olympian gods. But in 1820, Keats was evidently doomed by tuberculosis and sustained work became impossible. His friends and Brown nursed him. He refused hospitality from P.B. Shelley to live in Pisa. Joseph Seven accompanied him to Rome, where he died peacefully from the illness that had traumatized him for years. We are therefore going to look at the period to which Keats wrote, which is the Romantic period, and to look at the various characteristics and who were the earlier advocates of this period and what were its influences and its characteristics, so that we can get a better understanding when we start reading the poems themselves.